Garfield, Foxtrot, Peanuts, Calvin and Hobbes. When we hear these names, we think of, well, comics. We think of the funnies, Lucy tricking Charlie Brown into tripping over the football, or Garfield hating Mondays. These illustrated caricatures are a part of the common culture we all share. They bring humor to what seems ordinary. While they make us laugh, there's a key element that they miss, due to the simplistic and quickly absorbed medium: depth. It's not their fault. They're not meant to stimulate our minds in that way. They can make you think, but they can't provide a sophisticated example of creating writing with artistic value, as literature is defined. Graphic novels, however, comic books contained within themselves, created independently, create longevity, depth, change, and unparalleled potential. Composing of the written word and the drawn image, the pictorial literature found in graphic novels are a complex but underappreciated medium. Its capacity to not only tell a story, but to provide a climate by which literature and sequential imaging can work together to create a unique experience between the content and the reader deserves both understanding and praise. In order to understand the graphic novel, we must first understand the history of the comic book. The first real use of sequential imaging dates back to 1066 AD with the Bayeux tapestries. These were embroidered cloths that depict the Norman conquest of England. It was the first recorded use of text, in Latin, with images. The first comic strip came into existence around the invention of the printing press around 1440 AD. It wasn't until 1938 that Action Comics #1 was published, the first superhero comic. This began the golden age of comics. The archetype of the superhero punched its way into American culture, with the arrival of the comic book as a mainstream art form. The term graphic novel wasn't really used until 1976, with Richard Corbin's Bloodstar. Essentially, these works were longer, self-contained comic books. The difference was their context and content. Will Eisner's A Contract with God and other tenement stories focused on real-world narratives of real people, as opposed to superheroes and supervillains. While the graphic novel and the comic book shared the same storytelling medium, the graphic novel began to distinguish itself as a more mature, complex form. Sequential imaging, as defined by Scott McCloud in his book Understanding Comics, is juxtaposed pictorial and other images in deliberate sequence. In layman's terms, they are images separated by time, connected through a relationship made by the reader. Two images, viewed individually, may not seem to have a relationship, but when put side by side, they create the perception of sequence. When many of these images come together, they create a narrative, much like words used one after the other to fulfill the same purpose. This medium, by its definition, hosts a wide range of formats. Prose uses a complex variety of rhetorical devices to interest the reader, compare and contrast ideas, create harmony and structure, or disassociation and confusion when the author desires. There is a unique and complex structure to sequential imaging, much like rhetorical devices in literature, that pictorial imaging uses. When you look at the drawings found in comics, we should look at the image's literary value. That is, we look at how the image complements the dialogue, how the picture says what the dialogue does not. We must read in between the lines, so to speak. While there is a number of pictorial devices, such as illustrative sensory or the use of time in between each panel, the most important of these devices that can be compared to those used in literature that needs to be discussed is the icon. An example of the icon used in graphic literature can be found in Art Spiegelman's Moss, A Survivor's Tale. Instead of using humans, Spiegelman uses mice to represent the Jewish people, with cats as Germans. The text never describes these nationalities as cat and mouse, but the connection we make is impeccable. We immediately understand the metaphor. The use of the icon becomes a rhetorical device to help the reader see the perspective of the author. When you look at the simple smiley face, what do you see? Your mother, your best friend, or yourself? When images are abstracted through the art of cartooning, we focus on the details that we as the readers have to fill in of a character rather than the whole real image. We then associate the image with his words and actions, connecting ourselves visually and verbally. The dominance of text over image not only gives actions to the character, but to our imaginations. While, yes, most comics are typically thought to be rooted in fantasy or science fiction, involving a superhero with superpowers, or anthropomorphic mice, or cats, or dinosaurs, it's the use of the literary device that gives complexity to the graphic novel, not the genre. The difference between the graphic novel, a format meant to break literary boundaries, and the comic book can be characterized by the importance of the image juxtaposed with the presence of text. Meskin argues that if X is a comic only if it involves such a preponderance of image over text, then it is natural to think that Y is literature only if it involves a preponderance of text over image. So then, what makes these two genres combine to form such a striking and complex medium? Some comics possess some of the kinds of values that great literary works possess. For example, most great works of literature are similar to other great works of art in being creative, original, well-structured, and unified. It's a mistake to think that comics are simply the use of sequential imaging with prose and fiction. There's much more to it than we'd think, and we'd find the relationship between the panels. Earlier, we talked about icons in comics. If we were to capture a great work of literature's use of literary modes and devices as a statistic for its literary value with a prominent graphic novel's use of pictorial devices, we would find the graphic novel to both have literary and pictorial value. It uses both the aesthetic of art and the complexity of literature, along with its own set of rhetoric. This combination of pictorial rhetoric and rhetorical prose does not only make the graphic novel sophisticated, but it truly becomes unique. It's impossible to say graphic novels haven't found their way into the proud community of sophisticated literature. Art Spiegelman's Moss, A Survivor's Tale, won the Pulitzer Prize in 1992, and Alan Moore's Watchmen has been named on Time's top 100 English language novel list. While a select few examples have made their way into the literary community, the fight is not yet over. The potential of the graphic novel has only been tapped in the last 30 years. Its capacity to fulfill the needs of the entertainment machine, the literary machine, and even the education machine must be reevaluated and recessed because, as you've seen, comics are more than just characters with word bubbles. They're ideas brought to life in a medium worth taking the time to engulf your mind and soul.